Home buyers, in this video, I'm going to walk you step by step through the home buying process. In the past 2 years alone, I've helped home buyers close on over 50 home purchases. These have ranged from young first-time home buyers to retired couples who are downsizing, homes built in the 1920s to new construction. I've had to win bidding wars against dozens of other offers, and when the market shifted, I've gotten homes under contract 6 figures below list price. So there's a lot to consider when buying a home. We'll take it one step at a time and stay till the end to hear the simplest way to save on property taxes. Okay, here we go. Home buying process, step 1, get to know each other. In commercial real estate, the deal has to make sense for the business and the numbers have to work on the spreadsheet. In residential real estate, the deal has to make sense on a personal level for you and your family. One of my first real estate clients was my brother, and even though we've known each other our whole lives, we still had to sit down and have a talk about what life looks like as it relates to making this move. So we talk about your family situation. If you have kids, what do your kids need out of this move? What's an ideal timeline for you? I'm bound by a realtor code of ethics to keep everything confidential. As far as my own life goes, I might share with you about how when my wife and I bought our first home, we were dual income, no kids. When we bought our second home, we were single income, had a 2-year-old boy, a 1-year-old boy, and my wife was pregnant with our daughter. 2 very different experiences, all of that stuff matters. So we want to start by getting to know each other a little bit. Home buying process, step 2, we discuss your criteria. This includes square footage, how many bedrooms and bathrooms, lot size, your preferred age of home, floor plan and features. It also includes school district or the specific area you want to live in. This could be as broad as wanting to land in a certain area of North Texas or as specific as wanting to land in a certain neighborhood. Often we'll discuss how far north, south, east, and west you're comfortable going, and we'll draw a polygon in the MLS that matches your specific area. We'll also discuss budget. And that leads me into home buying process, step 3, getting qualified with a lender. Some realtors might make this step 1, and if you've already gotten qualified with a lender, that's fantastic. I just like to get to know someone and see what it is they're hoping to get out of the home buying process first. Then we can get you connected with a lender who can help you understand what you're qualified to buy, what your monthly payment would look like, how much money to put towards a down payment and closing costs, and an overall financial strategy. For example, if you're wanting to keep as much cash in your pocket as possible after closing, we might have a strategy of asking for concessions in the initial offer. Concessions just means you get cash back at closing from the seller. Or another way of putting it, whatever your cash to close number would have been, it's a reduction in that number. It's a reduction in the cash due at closing. Those concessions can be used to cover your closing costs. They can also be used to pay points to a lender, which then lowers your interest rate. The numbers can fluctuate, but 1 point typically costs about 1% of the loan. So if you have a $300,000 loan, 1 point is going to cost $3,000 in seller concessions, and that typically lowers your interest rate by about 0.25%. Okay, next, home buying process, step 4, we begin the search. Now, in many cases, this is step 0. You've already begun the search by looking on Zillow or Redfin, but we want to make sure that you're getting listings directly from the MLS. Why? Number 1, there are some homes that are posted on the MLS that are not posted on Zillow or Redfin. Number 2, the MLS typically has the best search features. For example, if you're looking for homes in Salina and Prosper, Texas, but you're wanting to land in Prosper ISD, we can limit the search by homes in those 2 cities and that 1 school district. Number 3, it's the best way for a buyer to communicate with the realtor about listings. If you see a house that you like, you can click the heart button to favorite it. That will help you keep track of the homes that you like. It will also help me understand your preferences. And then I can pull up that listing, see the listing agent's info, see what's written in private remarks, which only can be seen by realtors in the MLS. And I can pull up any docs that are connected to that listing in the MLS. For example, I can pull up the seller's disclosure, which is a document that sellers fill out to say anything they know to be true of the property. A lot of times we can find out how old the roof is from the seller's disclosure. Also, if there's been any foundation work done and there's a transferable warranty on that foundation work, those documents will be in the MLS as well, and I can share them with you. It also gives us an opportunity to adjust the search as needed. You can say, hey, we decided we only want to see homes that were built after 1970. Or you can say, we decided we want to see homes that have at least a 2-car garage, and we can make those adjustments to the search. Here are the main ways to limit a search in the MLS. Number 1, status. Typically, we're wanting to make sure we see all the active homes. We also may want to take a look at closed homes, as that will tell us what price homes are selling for in the area. Number 2, area. Area can be limited by county, city, school district, zip code, or even a specific subdivision. Sometimes we'll use these features to set the area for the search. Other times we'll use the map features to draw a polygon around your desired area. Once we've chosen status and area, we can limit the search by price range, bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, lot size, year built, number of stories, number of garage spaces, and whether or not there's a pool on the property. After that, we can get really detailed by adding specific features, but I don't recommend doing that, and here's why. Your perfect house could be out there and we could miss it because the realtor forgot to check the box for an attached grill. It could have an attached grill, but the realtor forgot to check that box. So when we limit our search by an attached grill, we are limiting ourselves to only listings where the realtor listed it correctly with the attached grill box checked. That doesn't always happen. So in general, I recommend allowing as many homes as possible to come through on the search, and then we can sort through them as they come in. Home buying process, step 5, showings. We can communicate about showings in whatever way you feel comfortable. The quickest way is to simply text me an address, let me know when you would like to see the house. I'll put in the showing request and I'll let you know when it's confirmed. We can do this for as many properties as you would like. After we book the showings, I'll reach out to the listing agent. I'll ask them if there's anything I need to know as we're seeing the property. I'll also ask if they have any offers, if they're looking to make a decision soon. If they do have an offer and they are planning to make a decision soon, I'll call you back and I'll let you know, hey, these 3 houses, we can see those this weekend. This house, they're making a decision soon. We would need to see it at 5 p.m. today. Are you available? Yes, no, we go from there. Once we're at the house, I like to ask you how you would envision yourself using the space. What do you like about it? What would you change? I can also let you know anything that's particularly good about this property. Maybe it's unusual to get this type of corner lot in this neighborhood at this price point. And I can let you know anything that is of concern. For example, if there's diagonal cracking coming up from the door frame, that typically indicates foundation issues. We'd want to make sure that those foundation issues have been addressed and that these cracks are just cosmetic. Home buying process, step 6, negotiating an offer. Sometimes negotiations happen verbally before an offer is written. Other times we will present a written offer and the sellers will negotiate with a counter offer. Regardless, at this point, we've seen homes, you've envisioned your family living in one of those homes, and so it's time to negotiate. There are 2 different scenarios. In scenario 1, there are multiple offers. When this happens, I don't like to just throw an offer against a wall like it's spaghetti and see if it sticks. I like to call the listing agent and see what it will take to get under contract. Sometimes they'll outright tell me their highest offer. Other times I have to ask a lot of questions to get an idea of what type of offer will get accepted. And then I'll tell you, hey, I think we're gonna have to come in around this price point at these terms to get under contract. Then you can make the decision as to whether you want to compete for that house or not. I just don't see the point in putting in offer after offer and continuing to lose every time. Let's find out what it's going to take to get under contract. If you want to make that offer, great. If not, let's move on to the next house. Now, I'll caveat this by saying you are in complete control of the offer process. I'm just an advisor. You decide what to offer. I just want you to have all the information so you don't miss out on your dream home by a hair when you could have easily gotten it simply by adjusting a few things about the offer. With this method, I've had a client who beat out 30 other offers, and we beat the second place offer by $1,000. I've also had offers accepted that weren't the highest offer, but we got accepted because we gave the sellers the exact terms they were wanting. In scenario 2, the home has been on the market for a while with no offers. In this case, I like to start with a below list price offer. In negotiations, that's called setting an anchor, and then see how the seller responds. Often they will come off the list price with a counter offer. However, once again, you are in control. If you tell me you don't want to mess around with setting a low anchor, you just want to get the house, we will go get that house. Home buying process, step 7, writing an offer. When it comes to writing the actual offer, we will discuss all of the terms that you want to include in the offer. Then I will film a personalized video that looks like this with my face in a bubble on the screen, and I'll explain every detail of that offer so you know exactly what you're signing. In this video, I'm just going to go over the major points of each offer. We'll start with paragraph 2D, exclusions. There's a rule in real estate that if something is attached to a house, then it's included in the sale of the house unless it's listed here as an exclusion. So what I do is I check the MLS to see if they've listed any exclusions, and then I'll let you know. Hey, they've listed chandelier in the dining room as an exclusion, and so we'll put that here, and we'll know that doesn't come with the house. Paragraph 3, offer price and down payment. Let's say you're putting 20% down on a $500,000 house. That would look like this, and we'll get a pre-approval letter from the lender for that offer price and down payment amount. Paragraph 5, we'll need to decide on an earnest money amount. We'll also discuss how much the option fee will be and how long the option period will be. More on all of that later in this video. Paragraph 6A, who is paying for title? The title policy ensures that the property can make a clean transfer from one owner to another, and there's not some long-lost uncle from 2002 who claims that it's actually his property. This policy typically costs about 0.6 to 0.7% of the offer price. In a balanced market, the title policy is typically paid for by the seller. In a competitive market, the buyer may offer to pay for the title policy to ensure that their offer is accepted. Also, whoever pays for the title policy typically gets to choose which title company will be used in the transaction. Paragraph 6C, who is paying for the survey? A survey costs between $500 to $900. Right now, $600 is normal for a survey. A lot of times a good survey already exists for the property, and so nobody will have to pay for this. However, if there is no existing survey, or if anything has been changed to the structure of the property, if a pool or a patio has been added, then we'll need a new survey. Typically, it falls on the seller to provide a good survey to the buyer. This would give the seller 3 days to provide a survey to the buyer. However, you may see this buyer box checked. That doesn't necessarily mean that the buyer is responsible for a new survey. It means that if the seller provides the survey and that survey is not acceptable to the lender or the title company, then the buyer would be responsible for getting a new survey. If this box is checked and this box is checked, then the buyer is responsible for the survey only if the seller provides an existing survey and that survey is not acceptable. If the buyer is going to outright pay for a new survey, then we check this box here and put the amount of days that we have to provide a new survey. That is typically done by the title company. No need for the buyer to do anything. The title company will order the survey and it will just show up as a debit at the closing table. If the seller is going to request that the buyer pay for a new survey, we would only agree to that in exchange for something else. The survey is just like anything else. It's part of the negotiation process. Paragraph 7H, residential service contracts. What that really means is home warranty policy. In a balanced market or a buyer's market, I'll typically put an amount here that will require the sellers to pay for a 1-year home policy for the buyer. But again, this is all part of the negotiation process. If a seller is going to get hung up on a $500 or $750 home warranty policy, then we would negotiate for them to give us something else that we want in exchange for not giving us the home warranty policy. Or you may decide that you don't care about the home warranty policy as much as you care about getting under contract and securing the property. Either way, we'll discuss the home warranty policy as part of negotiations. Paragraph 9, closing date. Typically, the quicker we can close, the more competitive the offer is. In a balanced market, 30 days to close is normal. Anything less than 30 days is going to make the offer competitive. In a less competitive environment, you may choose to do a 45-day or even 60-day close, depending on your situation. Typically, we're looking at about 25 to 30 days for closing on an existing residential property. Paragraph 12, concessions. Remember, concessions means cash provided from the seller to the buyer at closing. Sometimes we'll negotiate for concessions in the initial contract, so right here I'll put $1 million. That would be nice. Concessions can be put into the initial contract. That happens about a quarter of the time for my buyers. It's more common to leave this blank or put 0 here and then negotiate for concessions in an amendment after we've done the inspection during the option period. More on that later in this video. We'll also discuss addendums. These are documents that are added to the contract, such as the third-party financing addendum if you have a lender involved in the transaction, the Property Owners Association addendum, otherwise known as the HOA addendum, the seller's temporary residential lease if we're offering a lease back to the seller, and the list goes on. We'll discuss each addendum as needed. Home buying process, step 8, the option period. Maybe you've been searching for homes online and you've seen a listing that's labeled active option contract. That means the house is under contract and in the option period. During the option period, the buyer has the option to back out of the deal for any reason whatsoever and still get their earnest money back. Here's what that means. The day you get under contract is day 0. The next day is day 1 of the contract. You have until close of business on day 3 of the contract to deliver earnest money and option money to the title company. Now, what's earnest money and option money? Earnest money is typically 1% of the sales price. Sometimes more, sometimes less. New builds can ask you to put anywhere between $1,000 flat fee for earnest money all the way up to 10% of the sales price, depending on the builder. For an existing home, it's typically somewhere around 1%. So for a $500,000 house, your earnest money is going to be somewhere around $5,000. You send that to the title company, and that's your way of putting skin in the game. If you back out, get cold feet last minute, the seller gets that $5,000 earnest money. So what is option money? Typically, we will put an option period into the contract. 5 to 10 days is normal for an option period. And there will be an option fee associated with that option period. I've seen a seller request 0.1% for option money. A lot of times it's less than that. In a really competitive environment, it might be more than that. But for the sake of this video and round numbers, let's just say it's 0.1%. So for a $500,000 house, let's say your earnest money is $5,000 and your option fee is $500 for 7 days. In that case, you would wire $5,500, that's earnest plus option money, to the title company. If you go through with the transaction, that $5,500 goes towards your down payment, or it goes towards your cash due on closing day. So let's say your down payment plus closing costs is $50,000. So your cash due at closing would have been $50,000, but since you've already wired $5,500 for earnest and option, now your cash due at closing is $44,500. So what happens during the option period? First of all, you can back out of the deal for any reason you choose and get that $5,000 earnest money wired back to you from the title company. The seller would still keep the $500 option fee. That's non-refundable. That's like us saying, thanks for allowing us to take the house off the market for 7 days, here's $500. If you have a 7-day option period, then after 5 p.m. on day 7 of the contract, you can no longer back out of the contract for any reason you choose and get your earnest money back. You no longer have that option because you're past the option period. Home buying process, step 9, home inspection and due diligence. The home inspection typically happens during the option period. This is a buyer expense. It normally costs somewhere between $500 to $800 for a good inspection, and it's worth every penny. We typically want to get this done as early in the option period as possible so that we have time to come to an agreement with the sellers before the end of the option period about what repairs are going to be done. So if we have a 5-day option period and we get under contract on Monday, Monday is day 0, Tuesday is day 1, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We have until Saturday at 5 p.m. to come to an agreement about repairs with the sellers. So I typically want to get an inspector in there by Tuesday, but Wednesday or Thursday would be fine. Inspections either happen in the morning or in the afternoon. They typically take around 4 hours, followed by a 30-minute walkthrough with the buyer. So if it's a morning inspection, the inspector will get there around 8 or 8:30 with the buyer walkthrough around noon. If it's an afternoon inspection, then the walkthrough will be around 4:30 or 5. Now you do have the option of going to the entire inspection and asking as many questions as you would like, or you don't have to go to the inspection at all. We can just hop on a 3-way call with the inspector that evening or the next morning, totally up to you. The most common option is to show up for a 30-minute walkthrough at the end of the inspection. When we look through that inspection report, we're primarily looking for 5 things. Major issues with plumbing, electrical, foundation, roof, and appliances, including HVAC and water heater. If any of those 5 issues are present, we want to make sure that that is going to be addressed in the request that we'll be making of the seller. Sometimes we can add other small issues in there. We can also discuss what small issues it makes sense for you to do once you move into the house. That inspection report is still going to be helpful because it'll show you where you can be doing preventative maintenance. But I'm always diligent to make sure the major issues are addressed in an amendment to the original contract. And that brings me to home buying process, step 10, negotiating amendments. In paragraph 7D of the State of Texas 1-to-4 family residential contract, you can make specific requests of sellers to do something before moving out. For example, if there's an old above-ground pool in the backyard and you want that thing out of there, you can say seller to remove above-ground pool from the property at least 3 days prior to closing. However, it's fairly typical to check the box that we accept the home as is. Then, during the option period, once you've done your inspection, you can send in an amendment to the contract. In the amendment, you can ask for certain repairs to be done, or you can ask for concessions in lieu of those repairs being done. Again, a concession is cash given from the seller to the buyer as a credit at closing. When possible, it's better to ask for concessions than repairs, because if you ask a seller to do a repair, they'll get it done as cheaply and quickly as possible because they just want to get out of the house. There are a few times when it makes sense to ask for repairs instead of concessions. For example, if there's been a hailstorm and the seller can replace the roof through their insurance, we might say, seller to file a claim to replace the roof. If insurance claim is approved, seller to replace the roof 3 days prior to closing. For the most part, we want to ask for concessions because, number one, it's usually better to have your people doing the repairs. Number two, you can use those concessions to do whatever you want. You can save it to make those repairs. You can use it to pay points to a lender to lower your interest rate. You can use it to cover closing costs. In general, the more concessions you have, the easier it is to get a deal to the closing table. And here's the number three reason it's better to have concessions than repairs. When repairs are agreed upon, often they have to be reported to a lender. You have to get pictures done. You have to have receipts. If even one repair isn't done correctly, oftentimes people are scrambling to get that done before closing. In general, the more repairs that are agreed upon, the more complicated it is to get a deal to the closing table. So how do we go about maximizing these amendment negotiations? What we do is we take this great inspection that we've had done, and if necessary, we bring in specialists to give us quotes on any major issues. We present pictures from the inspection report along with estimated costs for the work that needs to be done or quotes from the specialist that we've brought in. In other words, we present a very clear case as to why we are asking for these concessions. We want the seller to see that these requests are justified by what we have found during the option period. Coming to an agreement on a concession or repair amendment can be one of the most stressful parts of this process, especially if major issues were found during the inspection. So just be aware of that, but once we've agreed on amendment negotiations, that's a good feeling because it means we've just gotten over one of the biggest hurdles in the home buying process. Home buying process, step 11, the contingency period. You might be looking on a real estate app and see that a property is active contingent. What does that mean? It means the property is past the option period, which means the buyer no longer has the option to back out of the deal for any reason they choose and get their earnest money back. But it still has at least one contingency in place. And if that contingency is not met, then the buyer can back out and get their earnest money back for that specific contingency reason. The most common contingency is called a financing contingency. Unless you're paying all cash for a house, you'll include a third-party financing addendum with your offer. In the third-party financing addendum, there's a space where you can put a certain number of days for your financing contingency. In a multiple offer situation, there are times when you can get fully approved by your lender before making the offer. That means you can put 0 days for the financing contingency, and that'll make your offer really competitive. In a more balanced market, anywhere from 10 to 21 days is normal for a financing contingency. Also, if you're financing an offer, it's likely that the lender is going to have an appraisal done. Unless you've submitted an appraisal waiver, if that appraisal comes in low, you are protected by the contract. You can back out and get your earnest money back, or we can renegotiate. For the most part, if our offer is reasonable, the appraiser is trying to find that value of the offer price, so most commonly, the house does appraise. Another common contingency is the sale of another home. Let's say you're selling your home and buying your next home at the same time. You put an offer on your next home, and that offer is contingent on the sale of your current home. You do this by including an addendum for sale of other property by buyer. An offer that's contingent on the sale of another home is not likely to get accepted in a multiple offer situation where things are really competitive, but in a more balanced market, a contingent offer can get accepted, especially if your current home is under contract and we can show that contract to the listing agent of the home you want to buy. Home buying process, step 12. The pending phase. You may look online and see that a house is pending. If it's been labeled correctly, then it's no longer active option, it's past the option period. It's no longer active contingent, all contingencies have been met, the sale is now pending. During the pending phase, as a buyer, there may be times when you feel like you're simply waiting for the next thing to happen. However, keep in mind that before any deal closes, there are a few things that will need to happen. First, if any repairs were agreed upon, we'll make sure that we get receipts for those repairs. Also, we'll do a final walkthrough before closing to verify that the house is in good working condition. The seller is obligated to convey the house to you in the condition it was in when the contract was executed. So if they've removed a fixture they weren't supposed to remove, or if the hot water heater isn't working, I'll get together with the listing agent to make sure those things are taken care of before closing. We'll also get a plan in place to transfer your utilities. If there's a home warranty policy written into the contract, meaning the sellers have agreed to pay for a home warranty policy for you, or if you just want to get a home warranty policy on your own, we'll make sure we get that lined up at this time. We'll also coordinate a time to sign the documents at the title company on closing day. Typically, you want both the seller and the buyer to sign in the morning if possible, because it can take a while to get everything to the lender and get the deal officially funded. You aren't technically the owner of that home until the deal is closed and funding can take a few hours after you sign, so we want to make sure we sign as early in the day as possible. From a lending perspective, there's a lot going on during the pending phase to make sure you have final approval. So you'll want to make sure you're getting documents to the lender as soon as they are requested. Before closing, the lender has to recheck credit, so they'll know if you've opened any new lines of credit. They'll also check employment, and so they'll know if you quit your job before closing day. There's a lot to consider, so I asked a lender friend of mine, David Kakish, to give me a list of do's and don'ts for buyers before closing. Here's the list he gave me. Number 1, don't switch jobs or quit. Number 2, avoid big purchases like cars. Number 3, keep credit card use minimal. Number 4, don't touch your closing funds. Number 5, fully disclose your debts on your application. Number 6, do not finance furniture before closing. Number 7, avoid new credit inquiries. Number 8, consult your lender before making large deposits. Number 9, stick with your current bank. Number 10, don't co-sign other loans. Number 11, resist new investment ventures. Number 12, avoid cash transactions. Use traceable methods. Number 13, don't ignore lenders' communications. Number 14, steer clear of changing your legal name. And number 15, postpone any substantial financial gifts. If everything is in order, we will be clear to close. And that brings us to home buying process, step 13, closing day. This is an exciting day. Usually there's a bottle of champagne or Prosecco involved. If you don't drink, I'll figure something else out, no problem. It can also be a nerve-wracking day. Just know the hardest part is over, and there's just a few things to keep in mind on closing day. Number 1, before closing day, you'll be given a closing disclosure. This will show you your cash to close amount. You can either get a cashier's check for that amount made out to the title company, or you can wire that amount to the title company. In some cases, you can wire it before closing day, or you can do it on the day of closing. Either way, the main piece that will be needed from you on closing day is that cash to close. Number 2, you'll need a current driver's license or valid ID. So before closing day, make sure your driver's license or passport is not expired. Number 3, signing for the sale of a house takes 30 to 45 minutes. Signing for the purchase of a house takes 45 to 60 minutes. That's because you'll need to sign a lot of lender docs that are involved in buying but not in selling. Number 4, when you sit down to sign, I'll just be there to verify that everything is good. I won't be signing anything. You'll start by going over the closing disclosure, which you will have already received. Then you'll sign docs one by one until we're at the end. Number 5, after signing, the title rep will take the papers to go make copies. You can choose to receive paper copies, digital copies, or both. While the title rep is going to make those copies, that gives us an opportunity to take a fun picture. I like to post a little story about each closing with your permission, and I typically ask the buyers to choose a closing song to go along with that story, so be thinking about what your closing song might be. Number 6, once you've signed and the seller has signed and you've sent in your cash to close, the lender will gather all the docs, make sure all the funds are cleared, and then we'll officially get the word that the house is closed and funded. Typically, funding takes a few hours. This is just the process of your closing funds clearing and the lender getting all docs squared away. But if you sign in the morning or even early afternoon, the deal should fund on the same day, and once the deal is funded, you can officially have the keys to your new house. Typically, I have one set of keys that I can give you when the deal is funded. That'll get you into the house, and then other garage door openers and spare keys will be in a drawer in the kitchen. And that brings us to home buying process step 14. Making the move. Moving logistics is something we'll typically discuss long before closing day. In fact, it typically comes up in step 1 when we're getting to know each other. I'll walk you through some of the options for moving. 1, if you're renting and your lease ends in June, we'd want to get under contract by April, close in May, and give you time to transfer your stuff from your rental to your new home. 2, if you have a home to sell, we typically want to negotiate for a lease back so you can stay in your current home after it closes and give yourself time to move from that home to the next home. 3, if a leaseback isn't possible, one option is to put your belongings into a pod. Pods can be held in storage for up to 30 days at no additional charge, and they can be delivered straight to your doorstep at your new home once it closes. In the meantime, you could stay with friends or family or in a short-term rental. When my family moved into our current home, we put everything into a pod, and then we lived on the second floor of a home that belonged to a family at our church. Whatever your situation is during the move, just know that it's temporary. We will work it out. The important thing is getting your family into the right home at the right time. 4, if we close on the sale of your current house and the purchase of your next house on the same day, then you can literally load up a moving truck the night before closing, have them hold it overnight, and then deliver it to your house once the deal funds the next afternoon. That's called a double closing. It happens several times a year for my buyers. Whatever your situation is, we'll make sure we have a plan in place. I do have professional movers that I can recommend. Moving is not the easiest thing in the world, but we'll try to make it as seamless as possible. Home buying process, step 15, filing for your homestead exemption. Once you're in your new home, don't forget to file for your homestead with the county. This is the easiest way to reduce your property taxes. At the time I'm filming this video, the homestead exemption reduces the taxable value of your home by $100,000 for certain local taxes. So if the tax assessed value is $500,000, you'll only pay taxes on $400,000 for certain taxes. What exactly that deduction applies to and how it applies is different for every county. I've actually filmed homestead instructional videos for all 4 major counties in North Texas. You can find those here. Also, don't forget to subscribe here, and then here's another video you might like, and here's my contact info. If you'd like to buy a house, just reach out. I'd love to help.